So a couple of nights ago, Eleanor brought to my attention a show on Netflix. It's called You Are What You Eat, a twins experiment. And it's all about a study that was done last year at Stamford University in America. And it covers essentially a comparison between a vegan diet and an omnivore diet. So a meat inclusive or a meat exclusive diet, essentially. Now, twins experiments are generally quite useful because they give us basically pairs of people who are as close to identical as we can realistically achieve, and they allow us to test various things between them. So a twins experiment comparing a vegan diet with an omnivore diet sounds like a really good thing to do, and potentially would be. But Eleanor asked me to have a look at this show to see what I thought, see if there were any useful bits in there that we could pull out and make use of. And I went through. I had a look. The opening of the show, episode 1, looked like quite good content, so I carried on watching, and then some little red flags started to pop up. So I thought I would quickly run through the notes that I made. I got a couple of pages worth of notes here, so I thought I'd run through these and give everyone that watches a bit of a heads up as to what to expect from the show and where to essentially follow along with what they've said, because some of it is good information, and where to exercise caution over what they've said. So I'll go through the notes largely in the order that I've written them, so sort of episode by episode, very loosely. But the first thing I will say is that if you do watch the show, I'd really, really like you to consider what you decide to do in terms of your own diets, your own nutrition, and don't base those decisions on what is essentially a form of entertainment. So content on Netflix is a form of entertainment. And I say this largely because there was a previous show, 2018 I think it was, something like that, maybe 17, called The Game Changers. And I had a few friends who watched the show, saw what it said, and adopted the ideas from it and made themselves quite sick. So that's the word of caution I'd offer over making changes based on this sort of content. So in terms of the show itself, so it's well presented, 4 episodes. They introduce a number of participants. So they started with 22 pairs of twins, and I believe 21 actually completed the study. They focus on 4 pairs of twins who make interesting viewing, seeing their lifestyles and talking to them about various things to do with their lives. So from a people watching perspective, it's interesting. The structure of the experiment, it was performed by, as I say, by Stamford University, so we have some respected people, experienced people running the experiment and involved in it. The funding came from an organisation called the Vote Foundation, that's VOGT. And when you look up the Vote Foundation, you see that one of their main goal, I found it on the LinkedIn page for the foundation, the main goal is to promote vegan diets and an animal-friendly overall way of being. So being sort of nice to the animals and eating a vegan diet. That's their main goal. So that's where the funding for this experiment came from. In terms of the people involved in the show and in the experiment, we have quite a long list of various experts interviewed and actually running elements of the show. And the majority of those that I have looked up online, quick Google for each person, the majority, not all, but the majority have a personal income based on vegan products, vegan services. So we have a personal trainer who's heavily involved. He's done well for himself personally. He's very fit. He's won competitions for bodybuilding based on a vegetarian diet. Up until 8 years ago, I think, the information I found said that he was also consuming dairy, but essentially a plant-based diet for much of his life. So he's promoting a vegan approach to training. There are authors of books which promote vegan diets. There are founders and owners of companies providing vegan-based products. So we have a showcase on a lady who has a vegan cheese company made out of, I think, cashew nuts. We have, what else was there? We have the guy who founded the Impossible Burger Company, this sort of relatively new idea of creating fake meat out of non-meat sources. So we have these sorts of people who are interviewed and promoted. So that's somewhere to consider why they're putting this show out and where some of the results may have come from, some of the bias involved in these things. And obviously these are things that I always look for when I'm reading any study on any topic, is who funded it, what are their sort of potential behind the scenes motives, are they without bias or are they potentially biased? So anyway, so I looked at the way they set up the study and it looked good. They were looking at a number of potential elements, things like body fat reduction. They talked sensibly about how body fat is the thing that you want to reduce and you don't want to be losing lean muscle mass. Absolutely true. Yeah, great point they made there, and absolutely absorb that content when it comes up. They did start to throw up some red flags when they started to talk about saturated fat, and they had this nice little graphic of how saturated fat clogs our arteries up and leads to cardiovascular disease, etc. That basically isn't true. It's been known to not be true for a long time now. A quick Google on for how saturated fat clogs your arteries, you'll get a page full of results that include many studies showing that it doesn't. It's not responsible for clogging our arteries. And you'll also find a lot of stuff in there. Later on, they talk about LDL, low density lipoproteins, one of the types of cholesterol. They talk about LDL being bad. And again, that has been completely disproved that LDL isn't bad and HDL isn't good. They're both parts of how our bodies work. Okay. So those sort of things are all linked together in some of the misinformation, or basically old information that is proven to not be true anymore. So saturated fat was my first red flag mention in the show. They went on, they talked about the need for dairy, and they pointed out that we don't need dairy. Absolutely true. Look at that part. It's true, we don't need dairy. Dairy can give us benefits, but if you're dairy intolerant or lactose intolerant, then it's not going to be a good idea. And there are populations around the planet who are typically lactose intolerant because culturally they didn't have dairy in their diets across the thousands of years in the past. They didn't have that there, so they didn't evolve the the ability to process dairy products, the ability to process the lactose. So absolutely fine, yeah, we don't need dairy. If you are not lactose intolerant, it can be beneficial. So absolutely true there. They talked about the microbiome, which is quite a big area of study at the moment and has been for a few years now. And the microbiome, as they point out, is very important to us. It's the gut bacteria that process our food and give us all sorts of positive health benefits. And if we mess up our gut bacteria, our balance between the different bacteria, then we can cause ourselves some quite serious health issues. So again, good information in the show about that. They did talk a little bit about history, another little bit of a red flag here. There was a lady, I can't remember who it was, it might have been the lady who has the cheese company, or the pretend cheese company. She basically talked about how humans historically hardly ate any meat, and that's just simply not true. Maybe around the times when we started farming, around 10,000 years ago, our reliance on meat sources might have reduced. So farming allowed us to produce crops. So we had that sort of source of food available to us then. So farming allowed us to have more things like carbohydrate in our diets. But up until we started farming, about 10,000 years ago, the previous several 100,000 years, we were hunter-gatherers. That's not in question. That's just what the archaeological record shows us. So we were hunter-gatherers, so we consumed primarily meat and fish, things that we would hunt for. And when we found them, we would also consume nuts, seeds, berries. And that's basically it. There might have been the odd leafy content to it, but not a great deal. We certainly didn't have root vegetables, so potatoes, carrots, these sorts of things. If you look for wild carbohydrate-based foods, they're few and far between. You get these stringy little rooty type things that might look like a whitish carrot about this wide, and those were the sort of things that they might have occasionally found, but certainly weren't common. So the majority of what we ate was basically meat and fish based, shellfish, normal fish, animals that we could trap and otherwise capture. So that was some of the things there. Moving on to further along, I'll admit I skipped almost the entirety of episode 2 because virtually none of it had anything at all to do with the study. Almost nothing. And a good chunk of episode 3 was the same, and there were bits into episode 4 also nothing to do with the study whatsoever. We had a lot of stuff about animal welfare. We had a lot of stuff about sort of the poor conditions that animals might be raised in and farmed. We had a lot of information about deforestation and things like that, which, well, to be fair, if you look at all of the vegan, vegetarian-based information, that's what they were presenting. You could also Google and find exactly the opposite information put out by the meat and dairy industries, where deforestation is all down to soy production, for instance. So that it's nothing to do with how these things interact with our own bodies, so nothing to do with the study. It's just an attempt to elicit an emotional response. So in amongst that, there was focus on bacteria in chicken, and they did this little glow light experiment around a kitchen showing where chicken had touched surfaces, and essentially they're still trying to make out that chicken is dangerous and bad for you, which is full of bacteria, and it's just wrong. just straight up wrong. There's nothing wrong with chicken. You cook it, you eat it, it's fine. We could have done exactly the same thing with reheated rice, which also triggers a lot of bacteria that can make you sick. So they didn't bother mentioning this. That's just one example. For instance, my nan, my father's mother, she used to cook up large batches of rice, freeze it for later use, and then reheat it, and would often get stomach upset because that promotes the bacteria that develops in rice. It's not a good idea. So again, very one-sided on that. What else is in my notes? So we've got, there was a good piece in there about the access and availability of good quality food. So good quality food, in this case, being fresh meat, fresh vegetables. Fresh fruit as well. So fresh ingredients. And a lot of places, these things aren't that readily available. I'm lucky here, we've got farm shops locally and things like that, so it's easy to access here. But where I am, even then, fresh vegetables aren't actually that readily available. I have to rely on really what's in the supermarkets for vegetables. The sort of old-fashioned greengrocers are fading away and disappearing. So the access to good quality food is limited, so we end up seeing an awful lot of ultra-processed foods. So be aware of that. I also saw part of a lecture, Royal Institute science lecture that was published last year, which was talking about ultra-processed food. So that's a good additional video to watch. I'd certainly recommend having a look at that. So, on to the results of the show. Again, the results that they pushed out were very heavily pointed towards a vegan diet being better for you than an omnivore diet. But the things that they were suggesting in there weren't that useful, and it did highlight some flaws in the study overall. So one of the flaws that they showed was that there was one of the pair of twins, a couple of guys, and it showed that one had lost more body fat than the other, one had maintained more lean muscle mass or gained muscle mass than the other. It also showed that they had different training programs. So you would expect there to be a difference purely on the type of exercise they were doing. One was training with weights in the gym, and the other one was doing some calisthenics type work at home. Both of which are good training, but they are different. You can't compare like for like if you're doing different things. There was also a mention of one lady putting on excess body fat and losing a lot more lean muscle, and I could have predicted that from the first episode, where she was told that she should get out and do her cardio. Now, cardio type exercise is good for you, absolutely, but if your goal is to lose body fat and maintain muscle, then that's not your best exercise type to be doing. Lifting heavy weights is, following after dealing with diet and such like. So in terms of the exercise, lifting weights, heavy weights, challenging the muscles, that's how you maintain lean muscle mass, not cardio. Light cardio is not the way forwards on that. It's just a part of an overall healthy existence, and certainly not the first place that you'd work on. There was also a mention that part of the cause of losing muscle mass was eating too few calories, and that what the person had done was not eating enough overall calories, and therefore had consumed their own muscle mass as a source of fuel. Now, we know from our physiology that protein, i.e. our muscle mass, is the least favourable source of fuel in the body. We process carbohydrates if we need fast energy, fast fuel in our bodies. We process fats if we want slow release energy, so long periods of time of exercise. We process proteins pretty much last because it doesn't really give us that much energy per gram of protein. There's an awful lot of work that the body's got to do to process protein, so it's least favourable. Okay, so but actually, yeah, the point that they were making about eating too few calories, that is a definite problem when you're trying to lose weight. You don't want to go too low on the calories. That can cause you issues. So those were some of the notes I made. I won't go into much more detail about what I've got here. I'm sure there are plenty of other sources of information out there which pull the show further apart. Trying to maintain a balanced view of it, though, we do see that there are bits of information in the show which are useful to us. So access to good quality food, looking at making sure we've got enough calories to provide our bodies with what they need, even if we're trying to lose weight. We're focusing on reducing body fat rather than lean muscle mass. Lean muscle mass is beneficial to us, and they did make the point that it is important to maintain that. So there are some positives in there. The concept of a twins experiment is a great one, but unfortunately the show is incredibly biased, and they even use reference to the Game Changers show from 7-8 years ago now. They reference the Game Changers show as a source of information, and really no. So for entertainment, watch it. For bits of information, watch it. But if you're looking to actually make positive changes in your own health, fitness, lifestyles, then please don't base them on an entertainment form. Actually base them on good quality information and decent research into what is going to actually work, and not going to set back your goals to a point worse than you were before. So that's all I'm going to say on it for the moment. Hope that's been useful. So see you in the next one.